Well, welcome, Mariana. I appreciate you coming on. How's it
Thank you for
going?
having me. It's
Whirlwind
going
for you. How long have you and Christian now been in Massachusetts? 3 months, 4 months?
almost four. It'll be four in April. So,
And so you lived your whole life, pretty much all your life, right, in Tennessee, or was there another state in there somewhere?
yeah, I say I escaped for a year and a half. I went to college in South Carolina,
Oh,
but
yeah,
then I came back to Memphis. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
very brief.
So what's that been like? Been that's got its challenges, even though there's a lot of good things with it, but that's a lot.
It's been really good. It's just been very different. I think getting used to the area and I grew up where was living before, so I knew my way around, and now I have to use the GPS for nearly everything. I can get to the grocery store, gas station, but
Yeah,
so it's just those little things that you don't think about until it's like, oh,
right.
I'm
Yeah,
entirely dependent on this
yeah,
device now to get to
yeah.
different spots.
How have Northerner people been? All right, been a better experience than maybe you expected. I
Def
hope.
Definitely a better experience than some of our southern friends thought we would have. They were like, "Oh, why would they're not friendly up there?" And
Yeah,
but especially at the church, everybody's been so nice, and
yeah, yeah.
even just interacting with people, it's been good.
What's the big difference? Like when you go to a store, or people, like just in general, restaurants or stores where you're not church people, is what's the biggest like difference, bad or good, from down south, from where you are down south?
Ooh, that's a good question. The conversations are definitely faster, and I feel like end more abruptly.
Yeah,
So that's been a little bit of a
I'm done
challenge
with you. See you
sometimes.
later. Our transaction is over. Yeah,
Which is not bad. I'm
yeah.
just not used to it. So there's been a couple times I was like, okay, did that conversation end well? Did it not? I don't know. Um,
That's the thing. Nobody cares. That's fine.
yeah, that's good. That's good. But yeah, people are very, very to the point, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of
Not
fluff.
fluff. Yeah.
So
Yeah. No one's got time for that.
yeah,
It's too cold up here. Just gotta get done with this.
have been very cold. And the
Yeah.
wind, the cold has not been bad,
Yeah.
but the wind has been.
Yeah. I told Christian, like, that's not because he's obviously, I can understand why you think it's always like that. I mean, obviously, it's New England, we get everything, but wind is, it's been particularly windy. I mean, I don't know what the measurements are, but it's not usually that windy, like this much.
Oh, okay.
So.
That's good.
The good news is you've lived through basically when you arrived here, which was right before Christmas. You've lived through the most challenging months, I think. I know Christian doesn't really like heat, but our heat will not. Might be a week or two that's annoying, but I don't think you're gonna have those kinds of problems.
I'm so excited for the summer because down in Memphis, like you don't get
Yeah,
out for
it's like winter here.
4 months.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
you
try to
just
get out
sit
when it's kind of
inside.
nice, but other than that, you're stuck in. So
Yeah.
yeah, so you'll love it. It's And then the fall, like you got a little bit of a taste of fall, but it was when you guys visited, but it was particularly warm. It was like, was that October, September? Yeah.
September.
So
Yeah.
sometimes it can be warm, but it was like 80s. It was really nice when you were here, but it was like summer, which sometimes can happen in September. But you start getting end of September, early October. It's really nice fall weather and the leaves and all that.
That's
So,
nice.
but that's not why I had you. I wanted to have you on. I know if people saw you on Christian's podcast, which is called Bad Coffee, we want to plug that about biblical counseling. And you talked a little bit about your story, but and the struggles, especially when you hit college, right? So what was? Do you remember like your worst in the struggles, specifically when you were at school and you realized you had your health issues and stuff that were happening? Do you remember a specific day or time period where you just felt like you're not at the bottom, but like felt like you hit a little bit of rock bottom with it?
Ooh, there were probably a couple points because I developed like got different diagnoses over a period of a couple years. It
What was
was
happening to get you to go to the doctor? Like what was the health, like what was to you, how you were experiencing? We know what
Mhm.
your condition is now, but at that time, what were you?
Yeah. The first thing that I think really got the ball rolling my second semester of my freshman year of college, I
And that
was
was South
South
Carolina?
Carolina.
Okay.
I remember I think I was walking to the dining common one day and like my throat felt weirdly like tense.
Mm.
And I'm an anxious person, and my sister had food allergies as a kid. So I
Hmm.
knew, like, if you have a food allergy, you
Yep.
can get a really bad reaction, have
Yep.
trouble breathing. But I just kind of dismissed it. And I was like, well, it's been a busy day. I've been kind of stressed.
Yep.
Like, I
Yep.
just need to rest.
Yeah.
But it kept happening and it started getting worse and worse. It was like every time I would eat,
Yeah.
I'd have this weird, like, my throat would tense up
Hmm.
and felt a little like hoarse. And it made me nervous. So I went to the doctor for that.
Hmm.
And they put me on, the routine in case of an allergy stuff like Benadryl and
Hmm.
antihistamines. And, but they couldn't find anything. They did allergy testing. I think they did blood testing. And it, it just progressively got worse, and partially because I was freaking out about it, which doesn't help in those instances.
Why were you freaking out? Were you worried that it was something like, not that it's great, but something real serious, or what was going through your mind?
I was mostly worried that I would have like a life-threatening reaction that I couldn't control because I didn't know what was causing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I'd heard horror stories of like people passing in their sleep because they have just this horrible reaction. And I was away from my family. I didn't have a car. I couldn't get myself anywhere. I was really dependent on other people to
Brody says
take me.
hello.
Hey, Brody.
All right, Brody, be good. So yeah, so were you having trouble sleeping too? Because you're like, I might not wake up, kind of thing.
Thanks to the Benadryl, no.
Oh, okay.
I was knocked out pretty well.
Yeah, right.
And I think that made things worse too, because I wound up taking quite a bit of Benadryl because I was still having symptoms. And
Yeah.
every time I'd call the doctor, they would say, well, you can up your dosage. So I was like a walking anxious zombie for most of the semester.
And this was your second year or second semester
Second
freshman
semester,
of
freshman year.
freshman year. So first semester, nothing.
First semester
Like
was
none of
good.
that stuff.
Nothing.
Yeah.
No major problems. Really enjoyed it. It was great.
Yeah.
But yeah, second semester, they eventually figured out I had acid reflux disease, and that was what was causing the problems. But it just took it so long to get it back under control because those medications that they give you, they take weeks to kick
Yeah.
in. And
Yeah.
so it eventually got back under control, but it was not a fun couple of months waiting
No.
for everything.
No. So what you've been a believer for, I think you shared pretty much your whole life, right? I mean,
I was
since you were a little
5
kid.
when I
Yeah.
came to know the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. Was this the first big test, do you think, for you're in college? I mean, you obviously had struggles in life, but would you say this is the first biggest, not test, but experience where you're like, God, what is the deal here?
I would say so. I had some struggles just in my home growing up, but it seemed very different because I was used to those almost. Like it was
Mm,
just this is the way life is, and it's difficult, but it's okay. But I never had a problem like this where it's like
what is this?
what is it? I don't know what's going on. I
Mm,
feel terrible. There's nothing I can do about it. Um, I loved the school that I was at, was really excited to be there. And so I
mhm.
was like, Lord, why is this happening? Like, I don't want to go home and stop going to school. Like, I want to stay in school and get my
Right.
degree and be with my
Were you
friends.
going
And
to doctors around school? Or
I
you
was,
weren't going home and going to doctors. You were, yeah.
no,
Okay.
no, I stayed and finished out the semester.
You were studying music, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
music education.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so so during that time before they figure it all out, what was, how would you describe your faith? Was it like, man, I was really clinging to the Lord, or were you kind of just more distant because you were going through that? Or what was your prayer life like? How would you describe that?
Yeah, it it was a really weird time. I don't remember a good portion of it, like details.
Yeah.
I think because in part I was on so much medication,
Mm.
and that made it difficult too because my brain felt so fuzzy. It was like I could try to read, and um, we had daily chapel,
Yeah.
and that was good, but I had a hard time like
Focusing. How about
focusing.
your studies? Were you struggling there too because you were having a hard time focusing?
A little bit. The Lord was abundantly gracious, and I think He made my subconscious just smarter than I actually am that semester. So I wound up doing okay um, academically, and my professors were all great. Like I told them, hey, if I'm falling asleep in class,
This
it's
is why.
it's
Yeah.
not you. You're not boring.
Well, maybe you are, but
Maybe, but that's not the reason.
yeah.
And yeah, I was also blessed with a phenomenal best friend who was in nearly all of my classes. And so she really kept
Helped
me on
you.
track as far
Yeah.
as, hey, this is due,
Was this a friend you met at college, or did she come with
Yes.
you?
Yeah, we
Oh,
met first day freshman year. So
yeah. Oh, wow.
yeah.
So you finished out and you go home still hoping to go back for a year or two?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So what happened to change all that?
I did go back for the first
Oh,
semester,
okay.
and that was when I developed tendonitis in my arms.
Okay.
And couldn't, I got to the point where I could only play for about 10 minutes. And the school they had like mandatory practice hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to practice for at least 10 hours a week. It was usually 12 to 15, depending on how many instruments you're taking
Yeah.
and what the professors require.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can't
You
really
weren't
get
able to
that
do that.
playing 10 minutes at a time. And again, they
Where
were
did the
so
tendonitis come
nice.
from?
I really don't know.
Is it from playing?
I
Probably.
think that might have been it. I was really like I played a lot in high school, but I
Now you
also did
play
a
the
lot of
harp.
other
Is that what we're
things.
talking, or was there other
Yes.
stringed instruments as well, or just mainly the harp?
Mainly the harp.
Mm-hmm.
And I took piano lessons, and then for music education, you have to take a different instrument in
Right.
each different orchestral group. So I took trombone that semester as well, which
Okay.
is how I got the 15 practice hours a week.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's probably what kind of pushed it over the edge was just playing so much.
Yeah. That can, you don't always think when you're not a musician, how much that physically can take a toll on you.
Yeah, and it's all like smaller muscles, so usually you don't get the same major injuries that like an
Yeah.
athlete would,
Right.
but it's smaller stuff that gets irritated and
Yeah.
inflamed. And
Yeah.
so that was what there was a lot of stuff going on with my family at the time too. My parents separated that semester.
Was that a surprise to you, or?
Yes and no, I would say. At the time, it wasn't a surprise. I knew over the summer, like my mom, we had spent the summer kind of separating her stuff from my dad's stuff
Oh,
because she
okay.
knew she was going to leave.
Okay.
A couple years prior, if you'd asked me, hey, do you think your parents are going to separate? I'd say, absolutely not. Like,
Yeah.
no way. They're both believers.
Yeah.
And that was always something that was just
Don't do that.
off the table.
Yeah.
But yeah, that semester between that and then, I couldn't practice anymore. I came home for Christmas break and just that was when I decided, hey, I just need to come home, be with my
Yeah.
family, try to take care of my health because it's not great. And the school was great. Like they let me do other stuff for my practice hours, but it's like, I can't, I
Right.
don't
They
know
were
how
trying to
long I
make
could
it.
keep doing
Right.
this.
Yeah. What was that like then? Like you gotta kind of loving school, loving what you're doing. Now that comes to a stop. You're going home. Your parents are separated. That must have been a trial to say the least.
It was tough. There was there was a lot of times where especially about school, 'cause I'd been just so excited to go, and I loved music and met some great friends there, and it's kind of like, Lord, why did you take this away from me? Like I
Yeah.
remember my first semester. just walking to class and praying and being like, Lord, thank you so much for bringing me here and for
Yeah.
letting me go here.
Right.
And then, it all got taken away. So that was hard. And I was happy to help my family as much as I could. But that was also tough because my mom was going through a lot. My little sister was going through a lot. Like everybody was just kind of going through it at the
Yeah.
same time.
And when you went home, were most of your friends that you had like in school at home, were they all pretty much at school? I mean, most of them. So you kind of felt like you're kind of by yourself a little bit at that point. You got stress at home. You're leaving your dream school, and you're home with not a lot of people to probably at least socialize with.
Yeah, I was homeschooled all the way kindergarten through 12th grade.
Yeah.
So I had
Like,
some
yeah.
friends, like youth group friends in high school and friends that I would see at like ballet class. But my college friends were like, we hung out outside of class, just,
Yeah.
it was different. And my family also moved churches, I think midway through my freshman year. So that was different too. We were at a different church with different people and had some other family members that went there for a little while. We overlapped for a little bit. But they were on my dad's side. So once my parents separated, that kind of became awkward because I was living with my mom and it was
Yeah.
a very weird time. And, I was separated from most of the people I had known before I left for school.
So college was a really great experience for you because you didn't really have a lot of that not that you didn't have a social life like you said growing up. It was being homeschooled and everything was like limited, right? Whereas now suddenly you're like you can hang out with people anytime you want. You're like, and that must have been jarring. Like this is finally like amazing.
Yeah.
And God's like, nope. Did he ever give you the answer? Why? Maybe a few years later.
I still don't completely know. I'm still like so grateful that I went to that school because my best friend that I met there, like she and I still keep in touch and
Yeah.
we chat every once in a while and
Must have been hard for her to lose you,
yeah, and that was I hated it for her and for me too, but that was really nice during that time in my life just to have somebody that cared that
Yeah.
much that
Yeah.
I wasn't there anymore.
Right.
So
It's always nice.
yeah, it was nice. I was like, oh, this is great because a lot of people that you go to school with, you're gone and I'm sure they miss you, but the people that you're just like casually acquainted with, it's like okay, life goes on.
So what did you do during that time? Did you work? Were you going to school at home? Like what were you during that, like when you had to come home?
I did work initially. It was a weird year. It was a really weird year.
Yeah.
I wound up picking up, I think at one time I had like 3 part-time jobs, but picked up a couple jobs, thankfully whittled it down to one, basically 1.5,
Yeah.
eventually. And that was pretty much it. I worked a little bit retail, a little bit of like fast food. And my sister was still in high school. And she is very smart, but not a self-starter when it comes to school.
Yep.
And so I was trying to help her like get on track and make sure she was on track to graduate on time and all of that stuff because I am a nerd and loved loved the academic world. So I was like, sure, I'll,
Right.
I'm happy to do this stuff. You don't enjoy it, but
Yeah.
I can make sure you're in the right point in your math book. So tried to do that and just, support her and my mom as they're going through everything and working.
Did she move same town as your dad when she separated from your dad, or was it nearby? Wasn't like far away.
No, it wasn't
Yeah.
far. It was probably 15, 20 minutes from the house where we grew up. So moved into a nice apartment and
Okay.
a very nice apartment. So sometimes the jobs were necessary because it was
To help.
it was a nice place to live. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know if we needed all this, but
What kinds of emotions were you going through during that time? Was like just, I know it's been a little while, but
It was it was weird because like I knew it was so much at once. I feel like I was almost numb sometimes. Like I was really sad about, the separation between myself and the rest of my family and my dad. I love my
yeah,
dad dearly.
yeah,
Was frustrated with some of the decisions that my mom was making just about herself and my little sister. But I was also like, okay, I want everybody to be okay. Like I want my sister to be okay. I want my mom to be okay. So I also felt this responsibility that's like, okay, I need to step up and do what I can to help.
mhm,
But just kind of numb too because, working and
yeah. Just
trying
kind of
to,
going through the motions.
yeah, keep
Yeah.
up with everything. I was very stressed. I remember going to bed and just thinking one night, it was probably midnight or one because I had worked the late shift, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired, but I can't go to sleep because my mind is just like
Yeah.
racing.
Yeah.
So it was not a fun time, very stressful.
Yeah.
Probably should have been dealing with a lot of those emotions instead of just being like, no, I've just got to keep going right now. Just put your head down and go.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess you live and learn those things, you know?
You do. It comes back later.
Yeah. You're not getting rid of all that stuff. You're just
No.
pushing it for it to pop up in times where you don't need it to pop up, probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so what happened next?
We my health was still not great. I was still dealing with like the tendonitis and like thankfully the like my stomach problems had gotten better. Those were under control more. I
Hmm.
had to be careful of what I ate and everything.
Hmm.
But and I'll preface this with I absolutely love my mom. Like our relationship has come a long way in the past couple years. I'm very thankful for her.
Yep.
She was having a really hard time and not making the best decisions.
Hmm.
And so we butt heads a lot. And part of that was on me
Hmm.
because I would make sure to tell her when I didn't think she was making the right decision. And
Yeah.
I know that was very hard for her to come from her daughter.
Yeah.
And I think I lived with them for about 6 months until she was like, "Hey, this is not working out. Like, you need to move out."
What was that like? You need to move out. Like, how am I going to do that?
It was it's wild looking back on it. I kind of expected it. Like things had just
Yeah.
been going south, and there was just a lot of tension, and we were arguing, but I'd gotten lunch with my high school Sunday school teacher, I think a week or two prior to that,
Hmm.
and she asked me how everything was going, and she's just amazing. It was so kind, and I can't remember if she asked me like just point blank, do you think your mom's going to kick you out, or if I just told her.
Hmm.
And she told me, she said, "Hey, you have my cell number. If you need me, call me. It doesn't matter what time of day it is, you call me." And I was like, "Okay, I'll call you." And so I didn't know at the time, but my dad had gotten in touch with her and said, "Hey, I'm concerned about
Hmm.
Mary Hannah. Will you
Right.
please reach out to her?" Because
Was living with him not an option? Was he?
it was my mom was not truthful about everything that had happened
Okay.
between her and my
She was trying
dad.
to kind of play favorites a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my opinion of my dad at that point was not where I would have wanted to live with him. And I found out later that it was not true. Like a lot of the things that I had been led to believe were not true, and felt really bad for my dad in that. But he was, again, in that, even he was great. Like he was still watching out for me even though we weren't talking really. But yeah, after my mom told me that, I called, and it was about 2 a.m. I called my Sunday school teacher, And she said, "Are you good for the night?" Like, and I was like, "Yeah, we're good for the night." And she said, "Okay, I'll come tomorrow morning and I'll get you." Um, and I wound up living with her family for almost 2 years.
Wow. They
Yeah,
obviously had an extra room.
yeah, they
You
did.
weren't on the couch for 2 years.
No, not on the couch. They had three kids, and one of them had already moved out, and actually two of them had moved out at that point. So they had a spare bedroom, and they were like, "Yeah, you can stay with us."
So, a quick pause. What would you, given you went through that, and again, we're not judging your mom or your dad. Um, Life's messy, right? How we deal with it is often even messier. But looking back from your perspective, we never want anyone to get divorced, but it does happen. Um, what what's a couple of things you might have learned, like, hey, this is the best way to approach it if you are divorced when you have kids, versus not so much.
Yeah, I actually listened to a really good uh, podcast about this recently, and it there were a couple things because I was an adult when they divorced, so
Yeah,
that made it a little
you
bit different
were
for
an
me.
adult, better than being 10, but
Yes.
you're still in a really tough spot. You weren't like on your own, and you were like just having to leave college, so you were an adult, but it was still a very young adult, I guess is the best way to put it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say definitely like don't try to persuade your kid to choose you over their other parent, you know.
That's very common,
Um,
right? Very common.
it
Maybe not
is.
intentionally, but
Yeah, I think that's what gets people is sometimes they don't realize um, how they're talking about, their,
mm,
I guess their ex at this point if they're already divorced, or their spouse if they're in the process of separating. Um, because it can be very subtle, just the tone or certain words that are used, but making sure not to do that and making sure that the adult child knows that you're fully supportive of them having a relationship with their other parent if it's a
yeah,
situation where that's a good thing.
that's you can see where that's a huge challenge, especially if your relationship is with the ex-spouse is not great, which is often the case. That's why you got divorced, right? I mean, especially in the Christian world, because I have met people who aren't believers who got divorced for no great reason, and they're still like friends, and I'm like, I don't understand that. But they were just like, maybe they just didn't feel like the spark was there, whatever their reasoning was, but they get along afterwards just fine, and you could see where maybe that wouldn't be an issue. But most of the time there's animosity there, there's a
Yeah.
reason, especially when you know that divorce is sort of a stigma still, which in the church of course it is, and
Hmm.
and so you have every reason to try to make it work. So when it doesn't, there's probably a good reason for that. So you think about it, your child, especially when you're an adult child, you're usually in life going to expect them to take your side if there's some, not enemy, but a person who didn't treat you right or isn't treating you right or whatever. You usually would have that expectation that like you're going to be on my side. But when it's their dad or their mom, like
Yeah.
you can't approach it that way, but it's the instinctive way to approach it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is. And you know the podcast I listened to, it was a counseling podcast by the ACBC, and
Mm-hmm.
it was so good even for me to listen to, because the things that they talked about, and just how even, hey, be supportive of your kids having a relationship with the other parent,
Mm-hmm.
talk to them about stuff, be honest with them, but your relationship with their dad or their mom is not their relationship. It's not their burden. So don't put that on them. It was really good to hear, because it was just like, okay, that's the way that it should work.
Yeah.
If a divorce does happen, which we don't want, but if it does, the kid
Mm.
at that point, that becomes your number one priority, is taking care of your child and supporting your child. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And probably even my advice would be you have to be proactive about it. So it's like, I think some in those situations think they're not making their child take a side. They're not, there's some that are just straight up actively going, which kind of sounds like it was a little bit in your case. But a lot of times they know they shouldn't do that. But they also kind of silently, without knowing, little comments thing, right? And
Yeah.
or how you explain scenarios, especially with adult children, because they see stuff. Like it's not like they're 5, and you can kind of hide a lot from a 5-year-old. And then, so it's almost to be proactive, which is so much even harder. It's one thing to just say, "Hey, I didn't say anything," but to actually say, "Hey, you need to have a relationship with your dad, and our issues are not your issues," and to actually proactively say those things and encourage those things, that takes a great amount of maturity.
It does, and I can't imagine, even being in that position. And
Yeah.
I think that's something that the Lord has given me over time is just, I couldn't understand what my mom was going through, what my dad was going through, because I didn't go through what they went through.
Right.
I went through what I went through in, in that period of time, in those circumstances. But, I think absolutely being proactive. I think it's just so easy. Like you said, it's so easy to drop a comment or say nothing.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's
more passive aggressive,
that's probably what you feel like doing, and probably what you feel like your spouse deserves at that point if you're angry or about the divorce.
Probably anyone who goes through a divorce, whether you think it's amicable or even it's like, oh, should get some type of counseling, even just to talk to someone. Maybe it doesn't have to be, go to somebody who's a, certified counselor or anything, but just, you got to talk that through. Because that person, to a person who's going to be mature. So even if like it's someone in church who is going to be a mentor, like, just say, be careful. This is what I see, because you're not seeing things right when you're in the middle of it like that.
No, and you really, really can't.
Right.
There's just so much going on and so many emotions involved. But I think absolutely, and I think that can help too if you have an outlet other than your kids, because I've seen where people, the kids around, so
That's just, yeah.
I'm going to talk to you
Especially
about
at
what I'm going
19,
through.
probably 19-ish
Yeah.
you were. Yeah. And your sister was how much, 16, 17 maybe?
16.
Yeah. Was there, as you approached marriage later on with Christian, and even, because I know it's obviously, marriage is great, just good. Don't expect that to happen. But you didn't really expect that to happen to your parents, right? I'm like,
No.
so did it ever give you a bit of a fear that maybe it wouldn't if you didn't have divorced parents? Like, can this just come out of the blue? Was that ever something you had to kind of work through?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I would say yes. I think it also gave me a perspective of, there are certain things that I just saw with my parents that either deteriorated over the years, things they stopped doing, communicating.
Mm-hmm. Don't kind of let that happen.
Yeah. And that was something that we talked about, and I was able to tell him, just, hey, I watched this happen to my parents.
Right.
I don't want that to ever happen to me. I
Yeah.
don't want it to happen to the person that I love, to Christian.
Yeah.
So, just being open and honest up front with like, hey, we're not going to let that happen, and this is what we're going to do, to make sure.
Have a plan, and yeah.
Yeah, make sure that and I'm sure that a lot of people start out this way too. So, struggles happen to anybody.
Right.
So no judgment, but even just saying, hey, we're going to make sure we're very open and honest with each other from the start. Like no secrets. We communicate. Yeah. We're going to learn to communicate well. So even if we're in a disagreement, we can still talk it out, and we're not going to leave anything, unsettled to where it's, it's growing and any bitterness.
Because the statistics are what they are, and if two people who are getting married, if one of the parents are divorced, their chances of divorce go up quite a bit. And if both are divorced, it's almost like you're likely to get divorced. Like it's a 75% chance or something, just statistically, right? Not like taking anything else into consideration of whether you're believers or not. So just, statistics, we all know what Mark Twain said about them, right? But they 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 still tell you some kind of a story, right? There is and I always tell, who I'm preparing for marriage, if they've gone through, if your parents have been divorced, especially if both, it doesn't mean that's going to happen. I wouldn't be marrying you if I thought that's going to happen. That's going to be the outcome. God's going to can overcome this, right? But what it means is you have a greater challenge, because whatever that might be, and I'm sure much smarter people could write books on it, but it seems pretty obvious that you saw the people that you look up to the most as a child make a decision, whatever you think about it, it's like still you saw it. Like it's real to you. It's an outcome that's possible. And in some way, some people, maybe, in your case, I don't want that, right? So it actually helps you. But some people might just be like, my parents seem all right. Like, if this doesn't work out, and it's a bad way to go into a marriage, because like you said, struggles are going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody has, we all had just, what does the Bible call it? Trials and tribulations in life. And, if you're married, then you're bringing another person into your trials and tribulations, and you're facing them now together. And
sometimes you're creating the trials and tribulations.
sometimes you're creating their trials and tribulations. And
yeah.
Knowing.
So take you back to, you get picked up by your Sunday school teacher. You got a room. You bring your stuff, but you're not feeling great still. Kind of working some jobs that you don't really want to be doing, because that's not like whatever. You're not at school. You're separated from one of your friends. Now you're not with your mom or your dad or your sister. Like what's going through you? I mean, there might have been a sense of relief in the moment, because that was getting pretty toxic with your mom. But what were you feeling at that time? Avalanche almost.
Yeah. It's funny you say that about the job. I actually got weirdly attached to my job at Target at the time.
Yeah, you had to, right? Cling to it.
Yeah, looking back on it, I was like, oh, that made a lot more sense. And I call her my mentor now. She was like, why do you like Target so much? But I was like, that's my that's my place that I can go. I know what I'm supposed to do.
Be fair, you still love Target, right?
I do love Target. Too much.
Every woman your age and older loves Target.
It's just a great place to be.
But it was an outlet for you, like a distraction and a place to belong, a place you had control, figure out all those good things, right? Like, I know what I'm to do here. I'm good at it. People respect me, probably, all that. Yeah.
They have to be nice to me, or I go to HR. There's parameters here.
That's sad. Yeah. The only people nice to me are because the HR is involved.
My church. I did make some friends at church, and they were. Were
you still great. Did you stay at the same church that your mom had gone to, or did you go back to the other one, or?
No, I actually. Where did I go for a little bit? I don't know, for a little while in there. I eventually wound up going to the church that my dad went to.
And was that your growing up church, or is this a completely different church that your dad had?
Completely different church, yeah.
People got to realize Tennessee's different. There's a lot of churches.
Yes.
Up here, you're like, I mean, I'd go to a different church. I just don't know where to go. There's like one or two to choose from that I would even want to go to. Yeah.
That's another thing that's been so different is, Tennessee, there's a church on every corner.
Yep.
Sometimes multiple on one street, and there's a lot of good, solid churches.
Yeah.
So my dad had picked another good, solid church, and I wound up going to with him eventually. But I think after I first moved out, and man, my mentor and her family were just so gracious.
What was family? Husband, kids?
Husband, kid, daughter, a little bit older than me.
Was she living at home?
She was living at home, and then she had another daughter who at that time had a 4-year-old son. And so they would come over, and I would get to,
Yeah.
They
So did you feel, sounds like, but did you feel part of like their family almost, eat dinner with them, or did they give you your space and say, hey, whatever you want? How did that, because that can be a little tricky, that dynamic.
Yeah, I think I felt as much a part of their family as I was able to
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
They really, I mean, we would be here forever if I told you just all the things that they did to take care of me. And
Mm.
yeah, they really included me, like Christmas, Christmas, Christmas.
Krampus? Nice.
I just can't talk sometimes. Christmas, and they had a tradition where they went out to the birthday person, whoever that was. They got to pick the restaurant, and the whole family went out. And so on my birthday, I got to pick a restaurant, and they took me
Yeah.
out for my birthday. Um, and so that was amazing. I was just really heartbroken at the time because my family that I grew up with,
Mm.
my
What
mom.
was during that time? What was your relationship with your mom? Was she kind of angry with you because you were? It's one thing to move out, but it's another thing to move into another family and kind of, and from her perspective, seem happier, even though you were heartbroken. But she might have saw more. Oh, you just left us and you're with this family now.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's probably the vantage point.
yeah.
Um,
But I can understand. I mean, it's not right, but I can understand her feeling that way. You know?
Me too. Me
Yeah.
too. Yeah, she was angry with me. I think she was angry about a lot of things.
Hmm.
And so I think some of that got directed at me that might not have even belonged to me
Yeah.
necessarily.
Hmm.
So we didn't talk for a long time. I think the longest we went without talking was like 8, 10 months,
Wow.
something like that. Um,
Like not even just saying, yeah, you not even text messages or phone calls or anything like that.
no, no. We every once in a while we would talk, but it would just
Not go
derail
well.
and go badly. And
Yeah.
um, so it was just kind of like, okay, we're gonna go our separate ways, do our separate things for now. And
And how did your relationship with your dad improve? Did you just like seek that out? And how did you find out that like, oh, my perspective was a little warped?
yeah, it was a lot of it was my dad, and then like just talking to my mentor
Mm.
because we talked. She talked through so many things with me, and um, she was able to look at it from a neutral perspective
Yeah.
and where I
Yeah.
wasn't.
Yeah.
And so just kind of talking through, everything over the last year and realizing, okay, there's some differences here coming from what you're telling me my dad has been doing and what my mom is telling me my dad has been doing. And, it's not matching up. Like something's not right. And
And
then,
given the fact that your relationship with your mom had gone so south, it's like, maybe.
yeah, it made me realize, I think, because my dad and I are a lot alike.
Yeah.
We think alike, and I just after living with my mom and kind of going through that period, I did start to think, okay, my mom's acting this way toward me now. Like maybe some of the stuff she told me about my dad isn't quite true because of the way she reacted to the way I'm behaving. Um, and yeah, but my dad, he was great. Like he was not pushy. He didn't ever push for a relationship that I, didn't want,
Hmm.
but he would check on me, and he was there the day that I moved out from my mom's apartment and brought his truck and helped us move all of my stuff. And just watching that, it was like, okay, if somebody's willing to do all of this for me
Hmm.
and not even have a real relationship with me right now, like,
Right. Something not adding up.
yeah, there's something not adding up. Like
Yeah.
it's evident that he truly cares, like, and he loves me as his daughter, and
Yeah.
he wants me to be okay, even if that's at his expense. So that was what really started to get the wheels turning, and
Yeah. What
yeah,
about your relationship with your sister?
it was a bit different.
You still talk to her though, because she's still living it with your mom,
Yeah,
assuming.
she she did live with my mom for a couple years, and I did try to keep in touch with her.
Hmm.
Um, sometimes, sometimes she didn't want to talk, and
Hmm.
but as she started to get a little bit older, she started to talk to me about some stuff, and um, I was able to relate to her in a
Yeah.
way that probably nobody else could.
Right.
So she eventually moved. She moved out as well. This was years later, and um, I knew of somebody that needed a roommate, and I was like, "Hey, you can, come live over here in this apartment complex where I am, and
Yeah.
that'd be great. We'd be right around the corner from each other." And
Yeah.
she took the bait, and
You reeled her in.
she did it. She did it. So
Yeah.
after that, we started to talk more and have a little bit more of a relationship again.
Yeah. Um, so in that 2 year period when so much is in flux, you're obviously going to church. Obviously, your mentor's a strong Christian, and
Mhm.
what were you? How would you describe your faith? Was it a little bit on autopilot, like, hey, I'm not like angry with God, but, or was it your faith deepening? How would you describe it?
It definitely deepened over that period of time.
Mm.
And I think especially like it had to is what I felt, is that it had to. Um,
How come?
I didn't know what was happening. I
Yeah.
didn't know what to do. And up until that point, I had felt very strongly, I know what the next step is in my life. I know I
Mm.
need to go to college, get a music ed degree, I'm going to try to become a music teacher, and then, see where the Lord wants me to go from there.
Yeah.
But that got absolutely wrecked. And
Yeah.
then plan B of supporting my mom and sister, as much as I could, that got wrecked. So it's like there is no plan C. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know what I'm doing.
Target.
Target,
own a
Target.
own a Target franchise or whatever. I don't even know if
Yeah.
that's not franchise, is it? I don't know. You could be a store manager.
Yeah, store manager. Go corporate.
Yeah.
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 But
So how did that faith manifest itself? What kinds of things were you doing or thinking about when it came to the Lord that you didn't before?
a lot of, the promises of God, I think, had to become more real to me.
Yeah.
I remember reading through, I think it was Romans and like Hebrews, and especially getting to that, that verse that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord.
Hmm.
And at the time, I was like, Lord, I have no idea how that's possible. Um, my life is a mess right now. Never thought I would be here. And then even as my health got worse, it's like I don't know what I'm doing, but I almost felt like I know God is good, and I have to believe that right now. Like if I'm going to get through this,
Mm.
I'm going to have to choose to believe the truth that I've been taught all of these years, and
Mm.
just know that even though I don't understand it, I can't see it right now. Like,
And the feeling, right?
yeah,
It's like the feeling of this isn't good, even though I just read that it apparently is. So I have to believe that.
yeah, yeah. And
Romans and Hebrews. No wonder why Christian fell in love with you, right? You weren't just like anybody reading the Psalms, Not that you didn't, I'm sure.
I did. I love the
I'm
Psalms.
sure you did
Love
read the Psalms, but still, mentioning Romans and Hebrews when you're going through a tough time is not, those are tough. Tough. They're two of the best books in the Bible, but they're not always the go-to when you're struggling,
Yeah, yeah. There were definitely portions, I think, in Romans especially, where I was like, this is just like really deep, and I don't know exactly what Paul is saying about this, but that
Yeah.
8:28, that's
Yeah.
for me right now.
Yeah.
That's
Just
for me.
cling to that one.
Um,
Yeah. So you mentioned while you're going through this, your health was getting worse. So talk about that. What happened?
yeah, I wound up just having more and more problems. I wound up getting tendonitis in my knees at one point, and then, they tell you just take a lot of, Advil and
Yeah.
ibuprofen, and
That's
then
not great for you, especially you already have the acid issues, right?
yes, and then that just tore up my stomach, and so
Mm.
I think it was about a year and a half into me living with them. I'd been to like 5 different doctors at this point. I was just tired all the time. I had no energy, and um, it was interesting because they would ask me, "Well, are you stressed?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm stressed. I'm, trying to go back to school, and working, and my family's a mess, and I'm living with a wonderful family, but it's not my family, and everything is different." And they're like, "Well, that's probably what's causing a lot of your issues is stress."
Hmm.
It's like, well, that's great. I can't do anything about any of those things right now.
It's so hard, man. It's like even when you shouldn't be stressed and the Lord wants you to give it to him and you do, but you don't because it's like you can't really help how you feel. You can help what you
Yeah.
decide and the choices you make, and that can help being proactive, but sometimes you're just stressed and just like literally nothing you can do about it.
Hmm.
That sounds so depressing.
It
I'm sorry.
it does. It does. But it was true. And
Yeah.
you know, I was proud, and I think in my pride, because my mentor had suggested, "Hey, why don't you try counseling?" And she was like, "I'm happy to talk to you about all this stuff, but a counselor might be able to help you in ways that I can't." And
This is still because they're assuming it's all stress related.
yeah,
Your health,
or
you're tired and your tendonitis and your all
mhm,
that stuff. It's like, oh, because you're stressed. But that's,
or at least stress affected.
yeah. But at a certain point, like you must have been feeling like, there's something else going on here.
Yeah, I did, and I think that's what kept me going to the doctors. Is
Yeah.
I was like, I know what my normal feels like, and I know my life is chaos right now, but I don't feel normal. Like
Yeah.
I remember living with my mom and my sister, and I was stressed out the wazoo at that point.
But feeling better.
I felt
Yeah.
better. I
Physically.
was able to get up in the morning and go work, an 8-hour shift,
Yeah.
and come home and do some more stuff and get up and do it all again the next day. And it got so bad, that I eventually had to quit my job working in retail.
Oh, that must have been tough.
It was, and it was the weirdest thing too, because I didn't feel like I felt like I was in pain when I would just stand up for too long
Hmm.
and walk around for too long. If you work retail, you're on your feet, all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Um,
Dealing with people. That's exhausting.
yeah, you gotta love them, gotta love them. Um,
Once again, because God tells us to,
yes,
right?
yes, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but it was weird. It wasn't like I couldn't tell anybody, "Oh, my foot hurts," or "My leg hurts," or it wasn't even a normal pain. It was just like it felt physically like almost like this dull, just I can't do this. Like I can't
Mm,
keep going, and
yeah.
I was so exhausted.
And I mean, was there a bit of a stigma to it? People are like, "Oh my gosh, suck it up, girl."
Yeah, I
You're
think
always tired and you're always,
I
and
know.
no explanation for it, right? It's not like, "Hey, I tore my ACL." Okay, now that makes sense why you're in crutches and you can't walk around. But this is like, I don't know what's wrong. I'm just tired. That's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was a hard part of it too. And again, the Lord very much blessed me, and my mentor, her daughter had actually been through a similar experience. And so
Oh,
she was very, patient and understanding, and she actually recommended the doctor that finally figured out what was going on with me.
yeah. That's
Um,
that's answered prayer right there.
it was, and I should have listened earlier and gone sooner, but he
Right.
was like a 2-hour drive. I was like, I don't know about that. So I went to all these different specialists, and they would do the normal where we're going to rule out these problems, and
Hmm.
well, you probably just have this disorder that's one of those, like, oh, it's just a collection of symptoms. We don't really know what
Right.
causes it, but you can try this medication, and
And there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it.
you're going to live like this for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it was, I'm nearly 2 years in now to living with them, and
Mm.
everything happening with my mom and dad. And
Yeah.
I felt like if this is stress, I should be getting better. Like I'm
Yeah.
back in school at this point. I'm making friends, and
Hmm.
um, my life has definitely improved. Like I'm living with this awesome family and
Yeah.
but I just kept feeling worse. And
Mm.
then the emotional symptoms would kick in and I would go from like super duper anxious to just, I think I spent like a week, pretty much a week solid just in bed. And I'd get up to microwave some pizza rolls and
Mm.
go back to bed.
Yeah.
And
And that just probably stressed you out even more. I can't do anything, and something's really wrong here.
it did.
Yeah.
It did. And I was like, Lord, I can't keep doing this. Like I can't live like this. I can't do anything. And I was really afraid that I was, because you hear nightmare stories of people with like Lyme disease and
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good
they,
point.
they wind up bedridden.
You get a lot of that down there? The ticks or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you hear about it. I had a couple friends that went through it, and
It's just all over the place up here. I just wasn't sure. Like, I think it,
yeah,
remember they said it came from Connecticut or something. I don't know.
Connecticut.
Lyme, Connecticut. I think there's a town named Lyme.
No way.
I don't know why. I'm sure there's somebody going to watch this and email me. I don't really care. I can Google it. Thank you. But I guess they just spread everywhere, and they went down and they went down south and they came up north. But I wasn't sure if ticks liked certain climates, but they seem like little snarky little things that could live through the nuclear holocaust if they wanted to.
Yeah. They're just evil.
They are.
I think they're just a result
so
of the fall.
bad. Yeah, so you're thinking that. So you finally go to this doctor. You're like, I gotta go.
Yeah, finally went to the doctor because I was like, there's nothing else I can do.
Right.
I don't know what else to do. I've
Yeah.
I've been to the specialist they told me to go to. I've taken the medications. I still feel horrible, if not worse, because then they have weird side effects sometimes. And I finally drove down to Mississippi to see this doctor, and he was a holistic doctor. And so he rattled off, like, you can try this test and you can do this at home. And he was like, we're going to run this lab work and this lab work and this lab work. And I was like, do whatever you need to do, whatever you want. Like, I do not
yeah,
care at this
I
point.
know.
You can
I
stick me
feel
50
like I'm
times.
gonna die. Please. Yeah.
Yeah. I do not want to live like this any longer. And he put me on this insane diet that was like no carbs, no sugar, very limited caffeine. It was basically meat, vegetables, green tea. And that was it. And up until that point, I would have said, no way, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But I was so
Get that desperate. You're like, I don't care.
I was so desperate. I was like, I will try anything.
Yeah.
And I did, and it took a while, but I slowly started to feel better. And he found out that I had autoimmune thyroiditis. And so my immune system had just been blasting my thyroid, which was causing all of and now I'm super anxious, but now I am exhausted and can't do anything, and I feel just depressed.
Right.
And, the autoimmune will do that because it's not like you're low or high with the thyroid hormone. It fluctuates. And so
Right.
you go back and forth between the
Right.
two. And he like put me on a medication for that. And it took time, but that was in March. And I think by June I was able to work a part-time job again.
Wow.
And I was
And this
so
is
happy about
pretty
it.
much just a diet to controlled thing.
Yeah, diet and a lot of supplements. Like he put me on, if you've ever looked into like holistic medicine and how to boost your immune system, probably anything that you
Yeah.
find, he put me on it.
Yeah.
So was taking like, I don't even know how many capsules a day I got up to. It was crazy. But I was
Not
like, I'll
cheap
do
either,
it.
right?
No.
Yeah.
But again, my dad was
Helping.
helping. He really took care of me. He's the only reason that I was able to stay in school and during that semester and, get groceries, and
Yeah.
he just took care of me. So yeah, it was that was an interesting year. I stayed on that diet for a while. And I would still have like the occasional bad day. I think for years afterward, like pretty much once a month, I'd have a day where I was just like, I'm dead.
In
I can't
bed.
do anything. I'm in
Yeah.
bed. I'm at home.
But you kind of know what it is now. And it's like,
Yes.
okay, I'm not going to die.
Yeah, I'm
This
not.
isn't going to last forever. I just got to, I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Yes, yes. Oh, and that was so good because I was like, I can deal with one day a month.
Sure.
That is no problem. When it's, 25 days out of the month, that's not so much.
No, not at your age. Maybe when you're 99, you know?
It's like, Lord, take me home.
Yeah, exactly.
Just take me.
Why am I still here? Oh. Yeah, wow. And did that just get better and better, or did the diagnosis change?
That part, the thyroid, got better and better. I've still had trouble with like my stomach over the years, and every once in a while they'll say, "Hey, we want to do a scope and make sure everything's okay." And those aren't fun, but it's been manageable. I would say it's still not like, I don't know if I'll ever get back to normal per se before all of this happened. Like
Yeah.
I tell Christian, and I'm like, you won't believe this, but believe it or not, I used to have energy, and I still, I was always the kid that would sleep 8-10 hours a night. I've never been good at sleeping 6 hours and just going.
Yeah.
I can't do it. But once I got that 8 to 10 hours, I'd have energy and I would go, and I've never gotten back to that. I still have to make sure I'm not overscheduling myself, and I do allow plenty of time for rest, and stay on top of my meds and my supplements, and just still try to eat healthy, take care of myself as much as I can. And I'm hoping I'll still,
Get
as
better.
I get further and further away from it, I'll get even better.
Or as you get older, your peers will just start to
Like, you guys are finally on my level.
we all need rest, Yeah, so that's so even today you obviously deal with that, and a lot of dietary restrictions. Do you feel, I mean, it's obviously become more and more just known, I guess, people, whether it's gluten-free or dairy and all that kind of stuff, and other things as well. It's less out of the ordinary. I mean, your condition and the severity of it is obviously different, but do you still feel like, I don't know, there's a stigma to it at times, like, oh, I got to explain this to people, or has that gotten a lot better?
It has gotten a lot better, I would say, and there's definitely like less explaining to do now
than it used to be. Yeah.
I felt so bad for some of my friends, like in college in Memphis, because I was super flaky for a while. We would make plans, and I just never knew, like, day of would come, and I was like,
Right.
guys, I
Can't do it.
I went to the zoo once with two of my friends, and I made it halfway through, and I was like, you guys, y'all go ahead, you finish. I'm gonna crash on this bench, and I'll see you at the front when you're done. So I was like, I can't do it. They just
had to grow in an understanding, right?
Yeah, and they were, again, the Lord blessed me with great friends. It was just sometimes I could tell,
A little bit annoyed, not annoyed, but a little bit like, oh, really? Come on.
yeah. And it was tough because, again, there's no visible, like, I don't have a cold, I don't have the flu, I don't have a stomach virus. Like, you wouldn't look at me and go, oh, she's sick. It was just every couple days for a while, then every week, every month, I would get hit with just enormous amounts of fatigue, and I usually felt tired, but it was the tired that you can push through.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, it just got to be too much.
Well, like we said before, you do have a diagnosis, which is good, but it's still like something that I could see where if it's not the right people, they could, come on, like, what do you, this sounds like an excuse, that kind of behavior and attitude.
Yeah.
But you married the right guy. He understands.
He does.
I'm sure he was similar to your friends in college. You're like, okay, we're going to do this now. We got to
No, I think when we were first dating, I hit one of those days and I did a bad job too. Like, I don't know if I'd even told him at this
Okay,
point
yeah.
the extent of my
Yeah.
health problems.
Yeah.
And so he was not annoyed. I think he was just curious as to, what's going on because he stopped by to check on me and,
Hmm.
I don't look sick. And, but, I told him and he was very understanding. Like, hey, when I say like I'm tired, I don't mean like the normal,
Right.
we all get tired. It's just,
Right.
it's a deep tired that I can't
Mhm.
do anything about. Like I can drink a cup of coffee and still be absolutely
Yeah, it's not.
exhausted,
Yeah.
which is sad.
There's no reserves there to push through.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
The reserves have been depleted and I just have to sit
Mm.
out for today or whatever it may be. But yeah, definitely as I think the years have gone by, people have become more aware of
Yeah.
like thyroid problems and just chronic health issues that may manifest in ways that,
Right.
before we thought, well, that doesn't make sense.
Keep it to yourself and suck it up was kind of the attitude before. You know, and
Yeah, yeah.
that probably wasn't very good. So, but I think now it's people are like, oh, okay. You know, the average person. I'm sure you still have some, but who really cares about them, right? We do. We care.
Yeah,
we care.
we do.
We just don't care about your opinion. So now you're kind of looking back. Now, obviously, you're still dealing with the will the rest of your life, unless the Lord takes it from you, which
Amen.
pray that happens. But thinking about your situation, mom, dad, sister, you were living with, your mentor. So looking back now, God really reconciled a lot of that. What kinds of things did you learn?
I learned a lot, and I wish I could say I learned it perfectly, and now I've got it down. I definitely don't.
Brody wants to be part of the podcast again.
Yay!
He's very eager to hear this question, this answer.
I learned a lot, I would say, about the peace of God. Because I can remember when my symptoms were at their worst and I would have really bad anxiety and I had a panic attack or two in there and just thinking like, I feel miserable right now. Like, I feel like some people describe it as I just feel like I'm going to die. Like, everything is panic and awful. But I know, like, God is with me right now. And I know if anything happens to me, I'm going to be with the Lord and I'm going to be okay. I don't feel okay by any means, but I can trust the Lord. And it was the weirdest thing because there was a peace, but I still felt awful and anxious at the same time.
Yeah. That's that peace that goes beyond all understanding, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
The Bible talks about, it's like, I don't understand it because I still am not at peace in some temporary ways, but the eternity,
Yes.
which for your age is a very, that's an advanced thing, that, because again, you're not thinking about, well, if I die, at least I'll be with Jesus, unless you're dealing with cancer, you're dealing with, some other really, really bad illness or what you were going through that was uncertain. Otherwise, you're 19, 20 years old, you're not thinking, hey, I might die tomorrow.
Yeah.
Whereas you get older, you start thinking more, am I at peace? Because this could go badly quick, right? So that alone brings a sense of spiritual maturity that you wouldn't have had without your circumstances.
It was, it was interesting. And I know I use the word weird a lot. I say weird. I just didn't understand it because I did think, oh, I'm 20 years old. I'm 21. I'm good. I've got a long life ahead of me. And, I didn't necessarily think, oh yeah, this is going to be the thing that takes me out. It's just when you have that level.
Some of your lowest of lows, though.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I wanted it to take you out, right? Like maybe not wanted it, but like, please, I can't do this.
I remember praying. I was like, Lord, either take this from me, take me home, or give me the strength to endure it. And I would much prefer one of the first two than the third because I don't want to keep dealing with this. And it was that, you know, that peace and that comfort that I knew couldn't have come from me at that point. Like my
Yeah.
body was just sending all of the panic signals, like something is wrong, something is wrong,
Mm.
everything is wrong. And, but the Lord was with me. And
Yeah.
I knew, like, okay, God is with me. I can't necessarily feel his presence right now, like in the way that you want to, you know, and you have a really,
Yeah.
really great day at church and you're like,
Yeah.
oh man, this is awesome. But it was like, okay, the Lord is with me. And he kept me through it. And, you know, everything with my family, everything with my health. I can look back now and see the Lord was guiding me through this event and this person, and crazy because at the time I'm just absolutely confused, have no idea what's going on, and felt sometimes like the weight is on me, you know, to make the right choices and to figure out what I'm supposed to do. But the Lord was the one the whole time, like even having my dad get in touch with my mentor, you know, a couple weeks before I need a place to live.
Yeah. The
And
doctor situation with your
yes.
pseudo sister.
Yeah. The doctor situation where she knew where to send me to get help. And she was the one also who told me, you know, I don't think the Lord wants you to work at Target for the rest of your life. You need to go back to school.
But I look good in red. Come on.
Red has actually not ever
Yeah.
been my
Yeah.
favorite.
Usually that's a good color for those who have a darker tint skin. I know that very well. I like the color, and then I'm like,
Yeah, I always
gray
liked
back on.
the burgundy.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
dark
burgundy's
red.
good.
I was like, that's good. But yeah, and I wound up going to Mid-America because they were like the least expensive option in the area, and that wasn't like a community college, and our community college doesn't have a great reputation, but they were not expensive, and I thought, well,
Christian and faith-based, and
yeah,
you're able to go there. I mean, you just left. You worked for them.
Yeah,
Still do work
still
for them.
do work for them. I had no plans of getting a degree there. I just thought, well, I'll stay here a semester, maybe a year.
Yeah.
It can't hurt to take some Bible classes. Like, that's not going to do me any harm. It'll just do me good. Wound up meeting some amazing people there, working there. The Lord leading me into biblical counseling and meeting my husband there. And I never planned on going there, certainly not for a bachelor's degree. It's like, maybe if the Lord calls me to go to get a master's in seminary, I'll do it.
Right.
But, you know,
Just kept on going. Like you said, you're a nerd, so what the heck? Keep taking courses. Eventually they started giving me degrees, right? Wow, though,
Exactly.
what a lesson. I mean, it's not a unique lesson, but it's so important that you can look back now and say to people going through it, or to yourself when you're going through it, whatever that is, God's got this. And there was times where you're like, I don't feel it, but I'm going to trust him in it, not perfectly, not sinlessly, not without, right? But you overall, you know, it's like a path that we kind of stagger around a little bit, but we stay on that path. And then you look back, you're like, oh my gosh, look, like God was saying, I know this is hard, but I'm doing some really great things with this, you know, that wouldn't have happened. And I mean, great things could have happened at your first school, obviously, but not the same things that God wanted you to experience.
Yeah.
Sometimes even for plans and purposes that you're not aware of yet.
Yeah. That's true. I love counseling. I never planned on getting a counseling degree.
You wanted to play music. You don't want to talk to people about their problems. Music is so much more fun. But
it's, you know, the Lord has already used it in my life in many different ways. But that's another one I'm still interested to find out, like, just how he uses that down the road.
How do you think he will? Like some of the things you've been through?
Like just the things I've been through in general.
Yeah, like how do you, I mean, you don't know, but or maybe you've already seen him use it in some capacity, I'm sure, you know.
I know just in general, I think he used it to make me a more compassionate person in
Mm,
general. So I grew up in a Christian home and, grew up doing Christian homeschool materials. And so I had a lot of biblical knowledge by the time I graduated high school.
mm.
But I would have said, like, oh, yeah, I love people. I didn't love people the way that I should have,
Love certain kinds of people or in certain
Yeah.
ways. Yeah.
I look at people making certain decisions and go, oh, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But now after having been through something like that, it's like, no, I understand as a sinful person, like why you would at least be tempted to make certain decisions or do certain things, or even, not knowing what to do out of desperation.
Or even you recognize the subtle attitudes that you might have had. Not necessarily, you wouldn't have thought of
Yeah.
them as like overtly sinful that you had, but the humbling of life can cause you to go, yeah, I wasn't a good attitude. I didn't realize, but it wasn't, you know?
Definitely made me realize I was not as strong of a person or as a believer as I thought I
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Because it
You had the
was,
head knowledge, but
yeah, it was easy to feel confident when everything was going well and
yeah.
everything was going to
Yeah.
plan.
Yep.
A lot less so when it fell apart. And I, in many ways, fell apart. Um, but on the opposite side of that coin, I think it gave me more confidence in the Lord
Mm.
because I saw Him holding me together
Yeah.
during that time when
Mm.
I know it wasn't me. I wasn't holding it together. He was, and there've been a couple times I even met a friend working at Mid America who was going through some different health problems, and I could just relate to her in a way because I was like, yeah, I get it. I get exactly what you're describing, exactly what you're going through, and
You could even describe something and it's like, what? Yeah, you get it.
yeah,
Nobody else does.
yeah. And yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And when you're going through something like that they haven't been able to put,
Mm.
this is why this is happening, or yes, you should feel this way because you have XYZ,
Mm.
it can be very frustrating. So even that was nice to be able to say to someone, what I wish somebody had been able to say to me,
Yeah.
is just, yeah, of course you would feel that way. Like,
Right.
this
Right.
is crazy. Um,
Similar situations will prop up with people going through divorce or divorced parents that, again, you didn't want that for your parents, but, or for you or your sister,
yeah,
but you went through it, you get it. Like anything else, when you go through something, you really can empathize on a very different level.
you can.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah. Um, what, if someone's going through, it doesn't have to be what you're going through, but a situation like that, where they're just feeling like the answers aren't there and they're not feeling it, whether it's a health thing or a divorce or something like that. What's something or things that you would say to do and to not do?
Ooh, that's a good question. Don't just go to WebMD.
Oh, yeah. It's like, that's come up a few times in this podcast, like
That's too
don't
funny.
Google it. Don't WebMD it.
Yeah. No, it is dangerous, especially if you're struggling with any type of anxiety around the topic. Just don't do it.
Especially when there's a mystery around it.
Yes, you will convince yourself that you have this super rare disorder that is only like one in a billion people, and you're gonna die next year, and that's probably not true.
I remember when I told this story before, but when I started feeling in my throat like it's like when you swallow a pill, but it still feels like it's there. It's scratched. Like everyone gets that, and you're like, still feels like it's in there. It's not. But it was like 2 weeks, and I'm like, so I Googled it finally. I was like, what could this be? And then it was either acid reflux, or which I didn't, because I always thought of heartburn as heartburn, like he's spicy or something. That's not what this was. So I was like, acid reflux. And then, or you could have like throat cancer, could die next. And I was like, so of course my mind went there, which it was acid reflux, which is like more than 9 times out of 10 when you have something like that, it's because of acid or something with your stomach getting older. And for me, but it was not the right move, And I had Jocelyn Slater on, who had breast cancer. And one of the things that she said was, there are really good resources out there. Here's where they are. Ask your doctor or ask someone where to go, because there's very specific hospitals that have a website that you can read articles on. In her case was breast cancer, but she's like, do not just WebMD it, because there's so many distinctions and nuances to it depending on what type and all that. You just, it's too general. It's too general. And also, if it's someone you love, don't do that either, because then you freak out about your wife, your husband, your best friend, because what is that? And the WebMD says they're dying,
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't do that. Get trusted resources. What else should you do?
I would say, I think one thing that I had to learn, almost like a Christian skill, if you will, that I had to develop, is reminding myself of the Lord's faithfulness, and not like coercing myself to believe his promises, but choosing to believe his promises even when I wanted to just say, the Lord has forgotten me, and I'm going through all of this, and maybe he doesn't care, maybe it's just gonna all be terrible forever. And because there were many times where I was tempted to think that way and to feel that way, or to even go into the, oh, woe is me, I didn't deserve all this stuff to happen. But knowing that God does love me, God does care about me, and God has a plan in all of this. He's going to get me through this. Like, I just need to lean on him. And that didn't look like, me being strong and, oh yeah, everything is great. Sometimes it just looked like me crying in my bedroom and going, Lord, why? I will choose to trust you, but I don't understand. Or help me to understand, help me to trust you, because I'm really struggling with it right now.
Yeah.
But
And the Lord wants that, It's in the Psalms, it's in the scriptures. And sometimes people don't understand that. If I don't have something good to say, I don't pray at all. And that's not a relationship. The Lord wants you to give that care to him.
Yeah. And somebody, I think it was actually my mom, told me once, she was like, the Lord already knows what you're thinking. He already knows how you feel. Like,
So just say it.
Yeah, just talk to him about it. Have a heart that is willing to be changed and willing to trust him, even if you're not at the moment, you're not trusting him, or you're having a hard time believing him, or just we're just people, and we can't see how everything works out. Sometimes I like to describe it to people, which is probably not original to me, is like you're in the middle of a giant storm, and there's this big thick blanket of clouds overhead, and you can't see the sun, and you can't see the way forward. And it's terrifying and it's scary, but God's not like, he's in it with you, but he sees outside of it.
Yeah.
And he knows where you're going, and he's the one that's leading you.
And also, I've used the analogy of the storm with people who are, it's like, keep going, like the right way. Don't go back.
Yeah.
Because the storm's still there. Right.
Yeah.
And that's specifically talking to people who maybe are dealing with addictions or things like that, where it's so hard, but don't go back, because the storm's not going to go away. Go through it, And in your case, or someone in a case like where it's not something that you've chosen, it's just there, you still got to go forward, and that's trusting God, even when you don't see it. I love that analogy. Yeah. What are some things that people did for you along the way that were particularly helpful? People on the outside looking into your life, and what did they do that was like, that looking back, that helped? Because we all got people that maybe are going through it, and what do we do? And our first instinct is to kind of avoid them because we don't know what to say, The
first thing that comes to mind is just how many of my friends were willing to just listen. And they often gave me like great biblical advice, which was good. But when they didn't understand, they just listened. I would say, oh man, that's hard. And because a lot of the times at least the physical parts of it, that my health that I was going through, they didn't know what to do, and the doctors hadn't even figured out what was wrong with me, and so they couldn't tell me, oh, go do this thing.
Yeah.
Because I had a couple people that I think well-meaning would try and say, well, have you tried this and have you tried that? And it's like, yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
But the ones that, I was closer to, my friends that I was closer to and knew, yes, I've
What you had
tried
tried.
this.
Yeah.
They would just listen, and probably longer than I would like to think that I talked and complained about stuff. But just listen to me.
They were like Job's friends for the first week. That they were really, really good, right? They were like, just be quiet and listen.
Encourage.
And then when they opened their mouth, it all went downhill,
God bless Job.
But in the beginning, they just sat silently with their friend, and that is probably, I don't ask this to everyone who I have on the podcast, but most, because it's just good to hear from perspective what helps. How do we help people? And it's almost always number one is just listen, especially the problems that are not, there's no big answer to it. There's just, I'm going through it right now. Grief, sickness, those kinds of things that as a friend you can't do anything about, but don't shy away. Don't judge. Just listen. And it doesn't feel like you're doing, especially for guys out there, right? It doesn't feel like you're doing anything good, but that's the best thing you can do sometimes for someone.
You really, really are doing good. And, nobody's perfect. So, sometimes you may say something and be like, oh, why did I say that? Or, but none of us are perfect.
Right.
They also, I know I mentioned I was super flaky for a while because I would make plans and then not be able to keep up with them. But they didn't stop inviting me to things.
Yeah.
They would invite me to the church gatherings or game night or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Which was always really nice. That was like, I still have a place there if I can be there.
Right. Yeah.
Which was great.
Yeah. Don't give up on the person and lose patience with them or assume they don't want to be with you and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was one of the things that chronic illness, because I would tell them, hey, I really hate to miss it. But after a while, we just all naturally start to doubt, well, do you really? Like, maybe you would try harder, or maybe you're just making an excuse. But sometimes with chronic illness, it's just not that way. You just physically can't do it, can't push through it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I know that anyone who's at least local that sees this I'm sure you're perfectly fine if they've got something they're going through that reminds them of your struggle. And you also have a biblical counseling degree, so you probably won't give bad advice. You never know. We all do it, but you got a better shot than most, that's for sure.
Well, I usually give people the disclaimer, hey, if I say anything that doesn't match up with God's word, tell me and just trash it. Just trash it. Go back to the Bible.
Dump it in the incinerator. Yeah. Well, people will know the Bible, or sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do. They just need someone else to kind of like, remember. Yeah, you're right.
We all need that sometimes.
And help us apply it. Like we know the scripture, but sometimes applying it to the situation. Oh yeah. I am being fearful. I am worrying about this right now. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you telling your story. Thank you for coming on. So does Brody. Brody wants to be on. I asked him earlier what struggles he's had, and he said that'd be a multi-part episode. So maybe
poor Brody.
if he could talk, guys, if he could talk. But thanks again, and can't wait to see what God's going to do.
Me too. I'm
and
excited.
Healing to you, and also using you to help so many others. It's really going to be a great ministry. So I'm excited.
Thank you.
Yeah. And cut.